Hey friends, thank you for joining us today. We are here to do our second podcast here with these great gentlemen.
Or if it's
the
first time that you've been here, this is the only podcast.
This is the only one you need to listen to.
Yeah.
So, okay, so our something that's kind of fun is this is the only time that the four of us are in the same space, like hanging out together, just talking as friends and family, right?
Absolutely.
So for us, it's just good to be here in this space. It's like, oh my gosh, it's my friends, finally. So it's good to see you guys. It's good to see everyone here. Although I can't see you from a heart perspective, I am seeing you.
They're here.
Yes.
So,
They're here.
okay, so kick us off. As far as the content, set the table for us for today.
Okay,
Stetson?
sure.
Yeah.
Something that's been rattling around in my head for a few weeks because my wife and I, we were going through this Bible project series.
As you do.
Man, like,
Did it happen in the car?
Were your kids there?
Please come and witness
Did the heavens
a
open
daily
up?
life in the Beeman household. I hate being projected in the way that you guys are projecting me right now. It's so inaccurate. Okay, forget the context of why. I was diving into
Holy things.
and full credit for being introduced to this comes from like the Bible Project stuff, and they were talking about the concept of soul, and I thought I knew what I was getting into when I started listening to it, but it totally shaped my perspective of soul in a really unique way. They were talking about how the concept of body and soul being these separate entities and like one being within the other and still like separate comes probably from a lot of kind of like Greek philosophy of like you have this imperfect thing and you have this perfect thing. And
So your body
Body.
is
Yep.
the imperfect thing.
Yep.
That's your flesh.
Yep.
And then you have your soul. That's this holy, perfect thing that is
Yeah.
contained inside the imperfect, right?
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And so that's where that idea kind of comes from. But before that, from a Hebrew perspective, there wasn't like this separation. It was all intertwined. Like the way that it was said is you don't have a soul, you are a soul. And there's like all these passages in the Bible where they don't make this delineation, but like if someone is a kidnapper, they're called a soul stealer. When like they take the whole person. If someone's a murderer, like they are a killer of souls. So this idea that we don't have a soul, but we are a soul was a pretty wild idea to be introduced. But it took me down this road of thinking about all these different things where it's like, this brings like so much value to all these different things. Like a good example is like when you hug somebody, it's like you feel something. Like it's not just like, I don't know, some people call your bodies like the meat suits. And it's like, yeah, I know. It's like, it's disgusting.
I'm not sure I've heard that before.
Yeah,
meat suit?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's like,
You're welcome.
Yeah, walking around in this meat suit. And it's like, and so it's like two people hugging, it means nothing. But if just playing around with the idea, if it was two souls embracing each other, that fits how a hug feels a little bit better to me. I could go on, but
No,
I'm
well,
just
when
throwing
you
it
think
in
about that, like, so I think the reason this idea feels so foreign is because it's like the exact opposite of the way a lot of us in the world view things today. Like even in the church, like there is the secular and then there is the sacred, which is why I think so many of us often feel like we're living kind of disingenuously. I don't know if I'm alone in that, but like when you talk to people, it's like, well, here's my spiritual life over here. It's in this nice little compartment. And then here's everything else in the world. I think it's a byproduct of that kind of framework of thinking where everything is so compartmentalized. And yet what you're talking about in the Bible Project is, no, you don't compartmentalize these things. They are one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and to go into this a bit, it could go to explain whenever things happen physically.
Yes.
It seems to impact us spiritually.
Right.
Yes.
And it's common to feel shame for allowing the physical to influence our spiritual, because that's just a physical thing, or that's just our finances, or that's just, someone who said that, but it actually impacts our soul. It's just not impacting our body. Someone who is sick, someone whose body is sick, that impacts their soul.
Yes.
It just doesn't impact their body. Someone who is unhealthy is, as a whole, could potentially be like, you could go on and on and on about the implications of the physicality and spirituality. And then is the thing you're actually doing is saying that the human soul is a sacrament.
For sure. And it goes both ways too. Like, it's not just if you're physically sick, it impacts the whole being. But there are so many times where if someone is going through something non-physical, it impacts them physically. Like the internal permeates outward, and like they experience physical symptoms of something that isn't
absolutely
originating as a physical problem.
Well, just as an aside, like there's a book actually about that. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And this book comes from like a psychological perspective, but looking at things like trauma, of like, hey, how when we endure trauma as kids or at some other point in our life, like our body actually carries that with us until we find healing from that trauma. And so I know somebody who I'm very close to who for many years suffered with like this morning sickness, this debilitating cramps and all these different things. And it was actually related to this trauma she had gone through as a young kid. And it wasn't until she actually went to counseling and got healing for that all these physical symptoms started to go away. Like they are so intrinsically tied to each other. It's like, why have we forgotten that?
Yeah. All right, so I got to ask, and possibly there's not a good answer here. How do you define a soul?
So I was just going to say, can you feel your
because
soul?
Like some of this, I was like, well, that's just psychology, and that's your body's keeping score. So it's intrinsically held by the body, and that's physical. So is that soul, or are you supposed to separate it out?
And before being introduced to kind of the Hebrew perspective on this, or the Jewish perspective on this, I would define soul as it's the part of me that makes me me. It is the non-physical part of me. But like the thing that's kind of been like knocking around in my brain is like my whole being is my soul. Or at least posing it as the question is like, could that be the soul? Like it started causing me to look at people differently, or maybe confirming a little bit of how I felt. And I think this can get taken to a degree because, I don't know, here's what I'm saying is like, when I look at each of you, I see you. I'm not differentiating, like I don't picture like this non-physical part of you. When I think of you, like when I'm at home and I think about my friends, I picture you. And just like this question is like, could I at least in part be looking at your soul right now in physical form? Is there a part of your soul that's being shown physically?
And why is this important?
Well,
Watch the Bible Project.
Your finger said that you're about to answer your own question, and I didn't want to go.
No, I was like, if I'm at home and I'm playing this, or I'm in the car, I'm going, so what?
Here's the difference it's made for me. When I've just been like out and about or around other people, it's changed the way that I've looked at people.
Yeah.
Where it's like I am seeing a piece of who they are. Compared to this, all this is going to go away perspective. And a piece of me is like the piece of me that is really me that is contained in this meat suit. Like, and it's going and leaving this behind compared to it's like, could I be seeing a physical expression of the core of the person that God has made? When I look at this person.
Don't you feel you can do that though sometimes?
I do,
Yeah,
yes.
it's funny. Just driving on like 16th here by the high school, and you see high schoolers walking. I feel like there are times that you can see like sadness in them,
Yes.
or loneliness or whatever. And I feel that sometimes. I don't know them. I don't know, but there's something in just how they are physically. So yeah, it's just funny that you mentioned that, because I even said that to one of my kids one time. Like, that kid looks sad, like you could just see it.
Yeah.
Do you think, as you've been wrestling with all this stuff, do you think that it adds more significance and weight to the things that you experience today? Like the interactions that you have, the way you treat people? Because like I remember a number of years ago, like I saw this article in Relevant Magazine. It was, some big pastor or whatever, and people were criticizing him for driving this big gas guzzling vehicle. And he's like, I don't really care. God's going to remake the whole earth anyways. So whatever, let's just go ahead and destroy it. And so like that's definitely one perspective I think you could take when you live with this like duality that exists of like, well, this is real. That's just whatever. It doesn't really matter. But when we embody our soul, like this Hebrew perspective you're talking about, do you find that it makes you take all the stuff that's in front of you more seriously? Does it give it more meaning and depth and value?
I would think so. And I think it points back to the beginning of the story too, where like God forms man.
Here we go.
And he says, this is good.
Yeah.
Yes.
He doesn't delineate the thing I have put
And now I've put
within-
something inside of
Yeah,
this meat suit.
right, exactly. No, it says like he breathed life
Yeah.
into it, but like he does after that, he doesn't say the thing that I have placed inside this other thing is good. He says
It is good.
it is
It
good.
is. Yeah, and earlier, so before the podcast had been going on, you brought up the idea of the Shama, Deuteronomy 6:4. Some will add on Deuteronomy 6:5. Just depending, it's Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul.
That is the Shema.
Yeah, Shema.
Shema.
It's
Okay.
it's
It's like
before
the Hebrew prayer.
every
Yeah.
before every Jewish prayer, before any Jewish happening,
Okay.
that they proclaim the Shema.
Okay.
And something that gets plowed by so easily is the first part of that. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. And this is the centerpiece of all Jewish truth, is this idea of one and whole. The idea that God is whole and the idea that God is one. It's very often interpreted by God is the only God. So he's the only one. But in the Shema, it's he is one. He is a whole integer. Everything else is but a fraction. And so being built in the image of God, the image being presented upon the human heart is this idea of wholeness. You are whole. You are one. The body of Christ is whole, and you are a fraction of the whole because he is the only whole, the integer, that type of concept. So this idea of body and soul combined in the image of God, proclaiming wholeness compared to fractioned out and broken.
Yep.
This is it. This is core. The idea of wholeness proclaims the glory of God.
Well, I think that's why too, like in Revelation, when it talks about, what's yet to come, it's not like ever saying God's going to scrap it all and go start with something new and just take our souls with us and do this new creation. Like when you read the language that's there, it's recreation, it's regeneration. So it's God taking what is here and doing something new. It is the heavens coming down, right? The new Jerusalem coming down to this place. Like that I think that imagery is really powerful, and I think it really kind of communicates this thing that has been stirred in your heart. It's like, no, like they aren't these separate things. Like there is something special, and I don't know what it just makes me wonder. Like, what have we lost by losing that theology or that understanding of the soul
By
and the
separating
body.
them.
Yeah, like just even beyond just the church, like thinking about culturally.
Oh man, like
the way
culturally
it's impacted
thinking,
us.
the value of our bodies has gone up,
up.
and
Yes.
our souls have been forgotten.
Yeah.
It's truly like we have gained the world, but we've lost our soul.
And then when you look at things like depression, anxiety, and how that stuff is just skyrocketed, like the question I'm wondering is like, is that a byproduct of losing touch with being whole with ourselves, like, and understanding our soul, and like this is a thing that matters.
We take more care of our physical being than we do our soul because we've separated them.
Well, or we even just deny the fact that we have a soul, right? It's like, oh, we're just like a consciousness, like we don't really matter. Like culturally speaking, I'd say that's true.
All right, so I got to share an experience. It's getting kind of heavy, and so I want to balance it out. And but it plays into it. It plays into it. Okay, so I take public transportation a ton, and so the other day I got off the bus and I was like burnt out, like I felt depleted, and I felt like I have to do something for my heart. And so I had heard of this chicken place that I have not gone before. And I go into this chicken place and I order a chicken sandwich. And this chicken sandwich...
It's going to make you cry. I see your soul.
That's what I'm saying. It was the best chicken sandwich I have ever tasted. So I pursued this chicken sandwich because I felt depleted. I didn't feel like hungry.
Right.
I felt depleted from a soul space.
Yep.
And I just wanted a chicken sandwich. And so I go in and I have this chicken sandwich, and it is incredible. I felt like it fed my soul.
Yeah.
And this morning I got up, and my first thought was, man, I want a chicken sandwich. It wasn't a body thing, but I felt... So, I don't even know how to say it. I hope that there's vocabulary here. I felt sane, but by the quality of this chicken sandwich, that it fed my soul.
Yeah.
And it isn't happenstance that there are some foods that are called soul foods.
Soul food.
Why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
There's my open door.
Oh, that's so good. And that just add, like, we talk all the time about like the value of like things happening around a meal, or like the power of having people over for dinner. It's like from this perspective, it's like you're inviting people over so that you can feed their souls.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
And then when you think about the Sabbath, right? The whole idea of Sabbath is about caring for your soul. How does the Sabbath begin?
Yeah.
It begins with a meal.
Yeah.
And it's not this like structured whatever. It's like, no, we're just going to sit down, eat good food, and drink wine and enjoy one another's souls.
Yep. Which makes me think of the practice of communion.
Yeah. Which again, I'm kind of like, it is so easy to spiral up and get caught in like complex vocabulary and theology. But the vocabulary of the soul could just be going and getting a chicken sandwich or a good cup of coffee and saying,
and that's so important because like most of us, when we think about soul care, what is it? Get a book, get a Bible, go memorize something, right? And so we've turned it into this spiritual exercise, which is great. All those things are great. Like I think all those things are needed. But maybe what we really need is a good meal with friends or like a nap.
It's the inverse sacrament. So sacrament again is a physical example of a spiritual happening. And I think in the church we often just focus on the spiritual happenings and we're going after this, but sometimes the spiritual happening is the physical example itself.
Yep.
I'm going to get a chicken sandwich because I am valuable. I am a son of God.
I love that justification, man. I'm going to go get one.
Yeah, I mean, and is that the thing that's happening in the breaking of bread and the pouring of the cup? He is taking this very complex spiritual happening that is about to happen and he's just going to break it down and saying, this bread is me, and this wine is me.
Yeah.
Just eat it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to get too far into this, but just eat it together. And whenever you get together, think of me and talk of me. And it's not that hard.
Yeah. Something I've seen other people do that I've been jealous of, because I feel like, at least for a guy to do this, I feel like you have to look like in your 50s to be able to like do this passively. But like people who go in public places and hold up a sign that say dad hugs, like free dad hugs or free mom hugs. And like watching videos of people who they in the same way, it's like, I just need a chicken sandwich. Like they just need a hug, and they just hug. They don't say a word, but like they break down and they open up.
Yeah.
And it's not because two people come in contact. Could it be because a soul is embracing another soul on this deep, intimate level?
I heard on the radio this morning, this is not great content here, but they were talking about like to uplift yourself, you know, these like momentarily things that can like help make your mood better. You know, there's like, just smile, you know, and I'm always like, I don't know. This one was give yourself a hug. And I was listening to that this morning and I was all, I don't know.
I'm driving right now.
And I just don't know. I don't know.
But like going back to Stetson's concepts, the things you do physically have a direct implication on your soul space.
Well, and then I also think about like how you can pour into someone else's soul. Like just hearing you talk about this chicken sandwich, like what would it mean for a friendship if somebody went and got that for you and brought it to you?
I would break down.
I know. You know, like I have brought you this, you know, like there's, I think in those lines too of like, you know, obviously feeding our own souls, but seeing people's souls and what is it that they need, you know, and how to pour into that.
Well, I think the thing for me that's so encouraging about this whole conversation is like it takes the spirituality that often for a lot of people just kind of exists in the church or their own private devotionals, and it brings it into the world. It's like, hey, everything has the potential to be spiritual because everything is spiritual. Yep. And if you're willing to open your heart to this and to be able to see the soul of another person and to be able to care for and minister to that, and even for your own, it's like, well, man, suddenly everything we do now has value, right? That there's nothing that's innocuous. Like you can go out and mow the lawn. It's like, well, okay, like your soul could be cared for in that experience. When you go eat a chicken sandwich, right? Your soul could definitely, if you're KJ, be cared for in that experience. But it just removes the mundane from life, and it brings value to everything. Like if we're willing to step into that.
It kind of flips things on its head for like the professions that are seen as like most valuable to least valuable. So like the employee that made your chicken sandwich, like the fast food industry is kind of seen as like bottom of the barrel. Like this is where you start or this is where you go when you hit rock bottom. But the implications of this for someone who's working in the food service industry, it's like you are in the business of caring for people's souls. And the implications of this for people in the healthcare industry, like you're helping people in the ER or like you work in a nursing home, it's you are seeing and you are caring for people's souls.
And by doing that, are you bringing things to life? Are you hiking things up? Like where you go, you are causing things to come alive. They are asleep. And going back into our theme of resurrection, what is it to walk in resurrection on a daily basis? It is the thing you are doing, the things you are speaking, the things you're consuming, bringing the resurrection of Jesus Christ to the forefront to all the things that have forgotten who they are, what they are, and what they were meant to do.
I think you can even go back to what you said in the last podcast where you talked about, the black and white and in color. Like, is your soul living in the black and white, or is it living in color? Mm-hmm. Is it experiencing that?
All I know is that chicken sandwich is colorful.
Thanks, friends. We're so glad you were here with us today. And hey, we will not be having a podcast next week. Some of you guys are out doing some cool stuff, so we will be back the following week.